Hey, what's up? Brent here. I'm the jazz musician behind LearnJazzStandards.com. And in today's video, I want to be talking about 21 jazz skills that you can practice in the practice room today. Tell me if you can relate to this. Have you ever just sat down with your instrument, after a while, an hour has gone by and you realize you've just been noodling, you haven't been really doing much of anything, you're just really wasting your time. And sometimes that could be because you really don't actually know what to practice. But if you have set up goals for yourself and looked at what you want to achieve and created measurable units in order to achieve those goals, or if you've listened to some recordings of yourself, managed to find some weaknesses and you should definitely hone on those things, that can be helpful. But sometimes it's really helpful just to have a bunch of different ideas for you to practice. And so that's my goal for today's video, to serve you by giving you a bunch of things that you should be practicing as a jazz musician. All right, well, let's dive into them. Here we go. Number one is scales. Practice your major scales, minor scales, melodic minor scales, diminished scales, whatever you want to do, work on that stuff. Scales are really important for developing technique on your instrument, understanding your instrument, navigating it. And that's really important to playing jazz music or any style of music, so work on scales. Number two is arpeggios. Be able to play arpeggios to your major seventh chords, your dominant seventh chords, half diminished, all these different kinds of chords. And not only that, try connecting them together in a chord progression. Try playing through the arpeggios and using voice leading to connect them together flawlessly. That can be really helpful. Number three is enclosure. Now, if you're not familiar with what enclosure is, it's kind of a technique where you approach different chord tones, one from above and one from below. Now, that might seem confusing. So to help you out today, if you want to go to learnjazzstandards.com/21 ideas, then you can find where I link to enclosure so you can take a lesson on enclosure in that particular post. So be sure to check that out. And number four is minor pentatonic application. That's right. There's a lot of ways you can use the minor pentatonic scale. A lot of people like to just use it over the blues and play bluesy stuff with it, but there's actually a lot of cool techniques you can do with minor pentatonics. If you go to that same link I just gave you, there's also some links to some other lessons where I really go into depth with some minor pentatonic stuff that you can do. But one great example for you is simply if you want to play something over a major 7 flat 5 chord or a major 7 sharp 11, try playing a minor pentatonic a half step down from the root of that chord. Sounds really cool. So that's something you can practice, minor pentatonic application. Number five is interval recognition. Ear training is really important for jazz musicians to do, and intervals are kind of the building blocks of all the ear training, the fundamentals. So practice singing major seconds, major thirds, ascending, and maybe a minor third descending. And practice recognizing them just by ear. Both of those things will really help you in the long run getting those fundamentals down. So practice interval training. Number six, learn a lick by ear. Learning licks by ear off of jazz records from jazz musicians you really admire is one of the best practices you can do. So if that's the only thing you do in your practice session, consider that a job well done, a good day's work. Now, number seven kind of builds off of that. Take musical phrases into all 12 keys. Practicing in all 12 keys, super valuable practice in order to internalize music, in order to create flexibility on your instrument, making sure that no keys are weaker than others. So take that lick that you just learned, bring it into all 12 keys, or maybe just several keys will help. All right, and number eight is learn a jazz solo by ear. Now, maybe that's not something you can accomplish in just one practice session, but you can at least get started and make it a goal to accomplish that solo by the end of the month or something like that. That's a really great place to start, and that'll keep you busy for a lot of practice sessions, and it's a great practice to do. Number nine is learn a jazz standard. Can't get any better than that. Learn the repertoire. The more you learn, the more you're going to understand jazz, so you can't go wrong there. Number 10, learn a jazz standard you already know in multiple different keys, maybe even all 12 keys. For example, if you know My Shining Hour in the key of E flat major, concert E flat, try taking it into A flat, try taking it to D. Different keys, it's gonna really unlock that song for you and help you learn how to navigate those chord changes in different keys better. Number 11, learn a blues tune. Now, the blues is really important in jazz. The jazz really comes from blues. It's rooted in the blues. And so it's important to know a lot of different blues heads and different keys as well. So that could easily be something that you challenge yourself to do. Find a blues head you don't know and learn it. All right, now number 12 is learn a rhythm changes head. Now, rhythm changes is another song form really important to know. It's based off of Gershwin's I Got Rhythm. So Charlie Parker wrote a lot of songs like that. He wrote like Anthropology, for example. So learn a rhythm changes head. The more rhythm changes heads you learn, the better. And especially if they're Charlie Parker heads, it's like learning a solo. So it's really good practice. Number 13, practice some jazz etudes. Now, etudes are awesome because they're kind of specifically written to serve a specific purpose, right? I mean, They can be a multitude of different things. There's classical etudes, there's jazz etudes, all sorts of different things, but etudes can be really helpful. And if you're looking for an etude book to work out of, try my book. It's 15 Essential Jazz Etudes. You can find that at learnjazzstandards.com/15 etudes. It's really helpful, and it's a book that I wrote just to try to spell out the best jazz language possible for you. So go ahead and give that a try if you want some etudes to work on. Number 14, compose your own jazz solo. I tell you, composing jazz solos is something I ask my students to do from time to time, and they always get so much benefit out of. And I've done it myself. It's really helpful to kind of solidify what you know about jazz language. You know, whether you're beginner or advanced, it doesn't really matter, but putting your best foot forward, giving your best effort to compose your own solo, imagine the stuff you actually would want to play. Number 15 is practice specific chord progressions. Now, we can boil things down. You know, you have a jazz standard and it's a long form. You can bring things down a little bit into smaller chunks, like a 2-5-1 chord progression, or a 1-6-2-5 chord progression, or a minor 2-5-1 chord progression, and really just hone in on practicing just that chord progression over and over and over again. That's a great thing. You could spend the entire practice session just working on one chord progression, and it would be a great work that you could do and really improve on. Number 16, write your own jazz lick. Yeah, you can compose your own jazz lick. You don't even have to lift it from somewhere else. It's kind of the same idea as writing your own solo, except for it's a micro little piece of information you're working on there. So it just gives you the opportunity to take like a 2-5-1 jazz lick and create whatever you would want over top of it. And likely that's going to be the stuff that comes out when you're playing is the stuff that's already inside your head. So that's a great practice to do. Number 17, practice improvising over just one chord. That's right, so forget about chord progressions. Just practice working on a dominant 7th chord. How can you make melodies over top of just one chord? It's actually a lot more challenging than you think. Or you could take an extension over top of that, maybe a dominant 7 flat 9, sharp 9, flat 13, or a major 7 sharp 11, and practice just over that one chord. Break things down into even smaller pieces. Number 18 is compose your own contrafact. So what's a contrafact, in case you don't know what it is? It's essentially you're writing a melody over top of the chord changes of a tune that already exists. For example, in my ebook, the Jazz Standards Playbook, I wrote a contrafact over top of It Could Happen to You, and I cleverly called it It Just Happened. And it's a great practice because I took an existing chord progression that was already really awesome, and I just wrote a really beautiful melody over top of it. So that's a great practice to do, write your own contrafact. All right, now number 19, we're almost at the end, I promise. Practice playing just the 3rds and 7ths over top of an entire song, a jazz standard. And the 3rds and 7ths, what are those? Those are actually what we call the guide tones. And the 3rds and 7ths are what define the chord. So in other words, if you want to get the chord changes to come out and you're playing really well, just target the 3rds and 7ths of every single chord in a chord progression, and voila, you're really going to hear how those chords come out. Now, number 20 is practice improvising over a jazz standard with a metronome. Now, practicing with a metronome, probably a lot of music teachers have told you that. You've probably heard that from more people than just me. But practicing with a metronome is really important. It's really helpful. Rather than playing with a play-along or even playing with other people, it's good to spend some time with a metronome, work on developing your inner time. I suggest putting it on beats 2 and 4. I think that's the best practice. And then from there, you can put it on a lot of different beats and really work on stretching your time feel. All right, number 21, and this is the last one. Thanks for sticking with me, guys. That is very simple. It's listen to jazz. So if you don't really feel like practicing, if you're just kind of not feeling it, it's better not to practice, actually. So don't practice. So what you should do is just listen, because listening is some of the best practice you can possibly do, familiarizing yourself with the music. All right, so now it's your turn to tell me what is something that you are going to practice in the practice room this week. Leave a comment in the comment section below. Let everybody else who's in the community hear what you're gonna do. It may inspire them, and you might get some inspiration from someone else too. All right, well, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe on YouTube and like our Facebook page, and be sure to join our jazz community, join our newsletter list at learnjazzstandards.com/join. I'm gonna give you a free jazz practicing guide ebook for doing that. All right, I'm Brent, I'm signing off. I'll see you in the next video.